Don't you fucking walk away from me, you ungrateful bitch! Come here! Shit!
If there's something particularly odd about Richard Linklater's latest film, it's a psychopathic tendency of its characters to overrule who they are supposed to be.
My job was not to debunk the fantasy, but rather become the fantasy.
We spend a large amount of time listening to protagonist Gary Johnson talk about himself, whether it be in voiceover or in conversation with other people. And this part of the film, which writers call the exposition, sets up the base to explain how a character thinks and feels, setting limits to what the nerdy philosophy professor can do within his environment. This part of him forms a part of what is largely called the text. The way he acts and talks forms a significant slice of the logic within which the story will operate. But the catch is, Linklater eventually spends the rest of his storytelling demolishing this very logic, jumping around film genres like nobody's business and yet giving rise to absolute unpredictable chaos.
We're expecting heavy turbulence,
Which manages to come out in quite a good way.
What just happened?
So how does he turn an apparently self-defeating approach into a masterclass in writing dialogue all of us should learn from? To understand this, we must zoom into some select scenes from the film and dig into a layer underneath what we call the text, a hidden layer of subtext. In the first few scenes of the film, what is being said in the film aligns with our logic of who Gary Johnson is and what he does. But when he's shoved into the role of a fake hitman, all of a sudden we are thrust into a conversation which is supposed to hide the text. Which is to say that our nerdy teacher is supposed to use conversation to make the second person believe in his ability to carry out the intended crime, so that the conversation itself can fulfill the hidden purpose of obtaining evidence. Here, Gary's becoming of a different person already betrays the text, but the change is still superficial. As time passes, this change turns deeper and more sophisticated within the context of these conversations. So let's take up another scene, the one where Gary meets Madison for the first time. We can suddenly sense another change happening to the subtext in this conversation.
Utter catastrophe.
What?
What was meant to be another one of Gary's missions to make the second person believe that he will kill the target according to their agreement now turns into something very different. First of all, the characters both forget their context as the conversation appears to turn into a romantic date. The first person now seems to betray the subtext of entrapping the second person. The second person appears to want a level above the text out of the first person. And the third person seems to have no idea that the first person is slaughtering the subtext consciously in favor of the second person. This mess of dueling subtext gives rise to an opening for Linklater to make Gary evolve out of the pre-existing text and create his own subtext. It is a point of no return where Gary has to lean into the subtext lie so much that he becomes the subtext instead. Gary appears to move farther and farther away from the rules of who he was supposed to be in the story. And underneath his power comes an unexpected psychopathy in the form of a Ron who doesn't need to care anymore. Ron lives out his fantasy beyond the confines of the text, as if he is choosing to change the genre from time to time as per his own inclinations. The tables have turned as Gary becomes more of a character to manipulate the police, and Ron appears to be almost like the actual person.
My job is not to analyze the events around my meeting. My job is to meet the client at those circumstances, complete the picture they've already drawn for themselves.
Ron is almost the child of deception. He is born not out of any genuine killer instinct, but merely the appearance of it. This gives rise to a climate where language replaces reality. Ron is able to give potency to the fiction of having killed multiple people, and this infuses a fantasy into his relationship with Madison, unlike the genuine love and passion that Gary had for what he was pursuing in philosophy. But this idea of the subtext invading text in more and more devious ways is thanks to reality itself becoming a simulation, which philosopher Baudrillard talks about in his seminal work Simulacra and Simulation. The implications of this moldable reality kill the sense of truth and authenticity itself, as we now head into the climactic orgasm of the subtext effect.
We gotta talk.
This time, subtext almost divorces the text, becomes its own animal, and what the characters are talking about is a manipulation that only they know. They get to reshape reality for the third person. This turns their dialogue into a complete fantasy game, creating a fiction within the fiction of us watching this film. In this world, being honest and genuine means living a life of suffering and being at the hands of manipulation by others. The only will to power is by taking subtext into your own hands and willing it into your fantasies. This world within world is the genius of Linklater, who in previous films had actually upheld the importance of subtext and text in working together to make reality. This time round, subtext overrides the text, making the text just a beast to be tamed into its own machinations. This post-truth, postmodern ability to give your characters the power to change reality has been seen in the likes of Deadpool before and might not be entirely new, but I like how subtly Linklater infuses this gradually into the story, first building the logic of it before he waits for the right time to shatter it all.